When Ian Manuel was just 13 years old, he shot a woman in the face during a botched robbery. Thankfully, the woman survived. In the aftermath of the shooting, Manuel voluntarily turned himself in and pled guilty. But despite his cooperation and young age, he was sentenced to life in an adult prison without the possibility of parole. Once behind bars, he was immediately placed in solitary confinement for safety reasons and stayed there for several years.
I've seen many people who are older than me commit suicide and just lose their minds and their grip on reality. For me, I used to fantasize about getting out, writing a book, telling my story to various people around the country and the world, being this big rap superstar, just anything to escape the intense traumatic experience that I was living in.
In 2010, the tides changed and Manuel's severe sentence was overturned by Graham versus Florida, which ruled that any teen that commits a lesser offense than murder can't be sentenced to life without parole. In 2016, he made parole and was released from prison after 30 years served. 18 of those were spent in solitary confinement. Manuel says that too often inmates are placed into this isolating environment for minor infractions and never get out.
I'm a proponent of changing the way solitary confinement is issued throughout the country, enacted around the country, and placing a cap. You know, the United Nations says that 15 days in solitary confinement is considered torture. Well, 15 days is considered torture, definitely 18 years. And I got people like Michael McKinney, Demetrius McCutcheon, Darryl Streeter, who have all been in solitary confinement in the state of Florida for over 25 years, languishing there. And not because they killed somebody or hurt somebody, but the way the system is set up. One write-up for anything, possession of a magazine, standing on the door, talking, extends your stay in solitary confinement for an additional 6 months. And those months turn into years, and those years turn into decades.
Manuel writes about his prison experience in the book My Time Will Come, a memoir of crime, punishment, hope, and redemption. Looking back, he believes his life sentence was a result of the Get Tough on Crime legislation of the 90s. During this period, the government doled out especially harsh rulings in order to set an example. This crackdown primarily affected black youths from poverty-stricken areas, many of whom fell into the wrong crowd at an early age and became yet another statistic. But today, with around 1.8 million Americans behind bars, the focus has shifted. Ria Saha Shah is a lawyer and the managing director at the Juvenile Law Center, a nonprofit law firm advocating for children within the criminal justice system. She says Supreme Court decisions over the last 15 years have shifted toward giving greater leniency to children and teens.
In these decisions, first they struck down the death penalty for children. They then struck down mandatory life without parole sentences for children who were convicted of non-homicide offenses, and then for children who were convicted of any offense. So the current state of the law is that a young person cannot be serving a life without parole sentence if it was a mandatory sentence, but the law still allows for a court to make a determination that a young person is deserving of a life without parole sentence.
These mandatory sentences of life in prison without parole meant judges had no say in the matter. Once convicted, they couldn't take a child's age or circumstances into consideration. But this all changed after the 2012 Supreme Court case Miller v. Alabama, when the justices found mandatory sentencing unconstitutional.
What Miller said was a judge has to have the opportunity to weigh all of the things that make young people more susceptible to doing stupid things and more able to rehabilitate themselves.
That's Beth Schwartzapfel, a reporter for the Marshall Project, a nonprofit media outlet covering criminal justice issues.
There's this line in this series of Supreme Court cases where they say something like, this is what every parent knows. Teenagers are impulsive, they are unable to weigh risks and consequences as well as adults can, and they're uniquely pliable. They can grow, they can change, they can mature. Thank God, very few of us are the same person we were when we were 16, 17. And what Miller versus Alabama said was that judges have to be able to take all of that into consideration before they hand down a sentence like that. It can't be automatic.
Schwartzapfel notes that the ruling in Miller v. Alabama made it clear that condemning a child to life without parole should be reserved for only the most extreme situations.
What they said was if the judge really does weigh all of the factors that are unique to children, then it should be really rare to find a child who is, and this is their language, permanently incorrigible. It's only when a child, you can say with certainty that a child has no hope for being rehabilitated, only in those rare instances that a child should be sentenced to life without parole.
But how can anyone really know if a child is truly beyond all help? Shaw argues that this isn't something a judge or anyone can say for certain.
Everything that we know about children really tells us otherwise, that children are not, you can't make a decision about a young person at 15, 16, even 17 years old. You can't determine that they will never be rehabilitated, that they are permanently incorrigible, to use the language by the U.S. Supreme Court. That determination is really impossible. And so a life without parole sentence really counters all that we know about the rehabilitative potential of children. And so telling a young person who's a teenager that this is the person that they are, that this offense that they have committed, that they are the worst thing that they have ever done, to use the words of Brian Stevenson, that no person is the worst thing that they've ever done. Children have a lot of potential for growth and change and rehabilitation.
What happened to Manuel is a prime example of the system failing to protect young people. He offers these words of caution for adolescents on the same road he once walked.
For the people that are playing around in that life, the young kids, one of the things, the reasons I played around in that life was, it was based on my environment, but also because I felt like it could not happen to me. I could not be killed. You're young, you have this invincibility mindset, or that I can't get a life sentence or go to adult prison. And then it does happen to you. And you are that one standing before that judge, listening to the judge tell you, there are no second chances, Mr. Manuel, and I sentence you to the rest of your life in the Department of Corrections. So I would tell you to actually change that mindset of it can't happen to you, because it can. And to the people that are incarcerated, that are looking for a spark of hope, just look at me, man. You can change, you can make things, you have to will things into existence, but it starts with you. You have to believe, as my mantra says, that the impossible is obtainable.
Today, juvenile justice advocates hope to see life without parole abolished in the near future.
I'm not saying that kids shouldn't be responsible for their actions, but to take a child and place them in adult prison for crimes that could be rehabilitated in the juvenile setting, it's just preposterous. I think it's a numbers game. I think we need to start by electing officials and putting people in positions that has criminal justice transformation and prison transformation as an agenda.
You can read about Manuel's struggles, triumphs, and forgiveness in his book, My Time Will Come, a memoir of crime, punishment, hope, and redemption. Available now online and in bookstores. Find out more about this topic and our guests, Ian Manuel, Beth Schwartzapfel, and Ria Saha Shah, by visiting our website at viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written and produced by Polly Hansen. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price.
Oregon's Tillamook County Creamery Association produces dairy products you know and love. In fact, the farmer-owned co-op makes award-winning cheese and is now the fastest-growing family-size ice cream brand in the country. Its commitment to stewardship informs every decision the co-op makes, and it's getting noticed. The company was recognized by Fast Company as a World Changing Ideas Award Honorable Mention recipient. And in 2020, Tillamook achieved status as a certified B Corporation. There are plenty more good stewardship examples in their newly released Good is Something We Make Together Stewardship Report. Here's Paul Snyder, Executive Vice President of Stewardship at Tillamook County Creamery Association.
When COVID hit, our farmer owners stepped up with a $4 million relief fund to help support employees, nonprofits, and local businesses in the communities where we operate. And we donated 10% of September profits to the Alpha Farmer Initiative to protect at-risk farmland and provide grants to up-and-coming farmers all over the country. We've also reduced water use, made advances in cow care, and joined the global fight against food waste.
The Tillamook County Creamery Association is owned by around 80 Oregon farming families and has been around for 112 years. Find out how they're a force for good in the world at tillamook.com/stewardship.
Cardiovascular or CV disease is the #1 killer of adults in the U.S., and millions of people trying to reduce their risk of a heart attack or stroke may unknowingly be taking medications that are not proven nor FDA approved to reduce cardiovascular risk. Let's hear from cardiologist Dr. John Osborne.
Many people are unaware that after a failed outcome study, the FDA revoked the approval of fenofibrates when added to statins, as the risk outweighed the benefits to heart health. It's important to remember that statins, along with diet and exercise, can lower cardiovascular risk by about 25 to 35%, but persistent cardiovascular risk, which can lead to a life-threatening event, may remain. I would tell anyone still being prescribed fenofibrates, such as Tricor and Trilipix, with a statin, to talk to their doctor about FDA-approved therapies for cardiovascular risk reduction.
To learn more and get clear on the facts, visit itscleartomenow.com. Again, that's itscleartomenow.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
When you start looking at these numbers, how does anybody afford this?
The stressful cost of health care in this country. Then,
this is a great time, especially coming out of COVID, to just really rethink it.
Why do we still spring forward and fall back each year when most people see it as a nuisance? I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.